It is always wonderful to hear the personal story of a practitioner many decades after their success. In today's episode, we will answer 3 questions. How was Myra's personal journey with sleep? How did she bring in a dinacharya, a daily routine specific to her which improved her sleep? Is having a dinacharya specific to each of us a foundation to good sleep? Ayurvedic Practitioner and Ayurveda Yoga Therapist Myra Lewin is a professional member of the National Ayurvedic Medical Association and a master yogini. Myra has amassed more than 100,000 hours of yoga teaching experience spanning 30 plus years of practice. In 1999, Myra founded Hale Pule Ayurveda and Yoga. She is the author of several acclaimed books on Ayurvedic nourishment. She is the host of 2 remarkable podcasts on holistic healing, Everyday Ayurveda and Yoga at Hale Pule, and Spark Your Intuition. Do excuse the noise in the background. Let's get started. Hey everyone, I'm Deepa, Light Functional Medicine Practitioner, author and yogini, and you're listening to the Sleep Whisperer podcast, the only sleep podcast with conversations and meditations. I'm on a mission to share profoundly insightful sleep conversations with global visionaries that merge together functional medicine and ancient wisdom. Breathe in bliss through weekly guided meditations and let yourself enter the land of dreams. Together, let's unravel the pieces, get to the roots, and understand the right tools to transform your sleep completely. Through this podcast, I want you to dream the best version of yourself. It's time to regain hope and begin your sleep journey. Myra, it's a pleasure to have you today on the Sleep Whisperer podcast with me, and today we are talking about your personal journey, which I'm really excited to hear about, because just to know what brought you into this space of Ayurveda, and you've been there for such a long time. You bring so much wisdom to so many people. So we are here to discuss how an Ayurvedic practitioner's journey took the turn in the context of sleep, of course, but in general transformation. So maybe if we could get started just talking a little bit about your personal journey, how you came into the space of Ayurveda, and then we can come into the context of sleep.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for having me, Deepa. In Ayurveda, as I look back at my life, Ayurveda was something I was looking for many, many years. I never felt well growing up. I wasn't formally ill ever, actually. I only had one cold when I was growing up, but I had pain in my body and I never felt good when I ate. And so these are things that as I came into young adulthood, I wanted to find a solution. And I looked a lot of places, all the typical places that one could look at that time, which was mostly Western medicine, and did a lot of work in that area, actually, and had planned to go to medical school. And then after working in the medical field, I decided not to. And so it took some time after that. I tried everything to be healthy. And I was just reading everything I could find, and found some old books on herbalism, and the person who cleaned my school when I was growing up, he was an herbalist, and he used to take us out into the woods and show us the different plants and things. So that was, those were the things that made me actually have some openness to it. And I really didn't come to it until I had been practicing yoga for a little while. And my yoga teacher introduced me to it. And my first reaction was, oh, it seems too complicated. I don't think so. And she showed us an old video back then, that when it was a big thing to have a video actually, and we and I couldn't really hear it. I just wasn't open enough, so I continued to practice yoga, and then I came to it when I was actually complaining about my body being stiff, and people said, "Oh, you need to try the ghee." And so finally I did, and that really opened it up, and then everything made so much sense to me. It was just that, as if all of the unanswered questions I had some explanation, and then also then I felt empowered by it, in the sense that these are things that I have control over, that I can do something about. And so that's what happened. And then and it made so much sense in combination with my yoga practices and my yoga teaching. And so then it grew from there. That's it. It's I often say it's what made my life make sense, because I was able to take not only my health and how I felt, but my spiritual life, and bring it all together, and realize how it all works together, because it's all a holistic system.
Beautiful. And how was your personal journey with sleep? Did you ever have any challenges, or even just not sleeping absolutely perfectly? Because sometimes people tend to associate sleep issues only if they've got a sleep disorder, but that's not necessarily the case. Maybe we just are light sleepers. And did you notice any connection to your body constitution after you embraced Ayurveda and noticed that intersection between body constitution and sleep?
Oh, yes. I think it's really interesting that you're asking me about sleep, because I have had quite a journey with it. I was always a light sleeper. Where I would end up out of the house and down the street and things like that. But I also, and then I went into, as a young adult, I had some years that I thought I didn't need to sleep. And so I went to graduate school, and for 2.5 years, and I didn't sleep more than 3 hours a night that whole time. Now I functioned, and I didn't use caffeine, but I paid a price for it afterwards. And so what I've learned about it, and what has since changed, is that it's not just the quantity of sleep, but it's the quality of the sleep. And that is affected by the constitution and by the imbalance of the constitution. So I have a lot of vata in the constitution, and excess vata can disturb the sleep. Excess pitta can disturb the sleep as well, and meaning that it becomes lesser quantity, lesser quality in each of those cases. If there's excess kapha dosha, then we have a tendency to sleep too much, and it seems like there's never enough, and then we get lethargic and feel heavy. Yeah, so each of them can have an influence, and since we each have all three doshas in us, then it makes sense that we have to have some balance of the doshas in order to have good sleep. So we have the tendencies. And so, for example, I had to calm vata and pitta and it took a little while. It's not something that for me, I honestly, I fought it. I kept wanting to stay up and not thinking, oh no, I don't need the sleep. But I really did, because our sleep is when we do our most significant healing. These days, everybody likes to talk about, I'm healing the past, or I'm healing my body. And in order to do those things, we have to have that rest. And so for me, it was learning how to sleep, and some little things that I do to help keep vata calm and keep my sleep much more peaceful. And so once I learned about Ayurveda and the Constitution, it was, I see what's happening here. And And so and when the doshas are out of balance, vata in particular, vata and pitta, the mind gets a little bit off. Yeah, the mind, we won't tell ourselves the truth necessarily. And so, like I said, that with that excess vata, I just wanted to keep going. Well, I can do it. Then why shouldn't I do it? And as we get older, we find out, because we accumulate the results of doing those kinds of things over a long period of time. So I have quite a journey with sleep. So these days, I have a little cotton in my ears, and I cover the top of my head and my ears when I sleep, and I sleep well most of the time. Yeah.
And I've done so many episodes on Ayurveda, Myra. We spoke about Acharya, but I'd love to, because you spoke about Vata and then what you did for it. And I'd love to, we hear so much about dinacharya. So I'd love for you to talk about what is a dinacharya and whether you brought a dinacharya specific in a way that it helped you move past towards better sleep and calm down the vata, because what you described as overdoing, I mean, that this seems to describe the entire modern world today of overdoing and ticking things off the list, perpetually growing list. So if you could talk us through a dinacharya, how did you apply it to yourself so that we really see how we apply a practice which becomes sustainable long term?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I mentioned those couple of little things I do, which is with cotton in the ears, and even for people who use earplugs, I think that the cotton in the ears is different, and so it's something to consider. But the practice of Abhyanga was very significant for me. My body having a lot of vata and in my constitution, as well as being out of balance with it, I was extremely dry. And so the oil just calmed the nerves. It calmed my system tremendously. So Abhyanga is oiling the body in a very specific pattern for calming vata dosha. And so that's something that I started doing. In the beginning, I did it in the evening before bed, because it helped me to sleep. Now that's, you put the oil on and then you let it be on for a little while, and then you bathe, without soap. So you're not going to bed with oil all over you, but your skin is going to be fairly saturated, hopefully. And so that's something that made a big, big difference. The other thing that made a big difference too was to have regular meal times and regular sleep time. And that's in learning about that and in Ayurveda and how the doshas function through the course of the day, then it just makes sense. Oh, yes, I need to go to bed before 10 o'clock, because if I stay up past 10, then my mind is going to get very active with the pitta coming up. And so, so that also made a big, big difference in my ability to go to sleep. Yeah.
And could we talk a little bit about that, Myra? Because I know that a lot of times there are people who are changing these rhythms every single day. They're eating different times every day, sleeping at different times, and all the more so on the weekdays and the weekends. And somehow, they feel they're doing something beneficial because they're trying to catch up on sleep, because they're not sleeping optimally through the week. So maybe they sleep longer, wake up very late in the morning on the weekend. So maybe if you could just talk us through, why is it so important to have these rhythms set in a way where it's the same every day?
Mm-hmm. It is important. And that has to do with the function of the doshas, or the elements in us, in our bodies. And so each dosha has a primary time where it's active. So I mentioned pitta dosha, which is responsible for transformation and healing. That's active between approximately 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. and also during 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And vata then comes after that. Vata comes after that, and then kapha comes after that. So for example, then when people are having difficulty going to sleep and their mind is going, well, we know the pitta is high. That's it. But if somebody goes to sleep just fine, but then they're waking up at 3 o'clock, or maybe they go back to sleep, and then they wake up again at 4 o'clock. So this, we know this is the vata time from 2 to 6, and so we know then that yes, there's excess vata, so we need to calm that down. Sometimes there's both of those things, and so and then from 6 to 10 a.m. and p.m. Is the kapha time, and so if we get up in the kapha time of day, well, it's heavier. Yes, it's a heavier time of day. And so it's better if we can get up before 6. So if you go to bed before 10 and you get up before 6, you're going to have your best healing as well as have the most energy through the day. And and doing that regularly makes such a difference in how you feel. Or it made a big difference in how I feel. And I see it in all my clients too. We have some people who become real cheerleaders for going to bed by 10 o'clock. It makes a huge difference. It does. And, if you think about it, if you stay up past 10 o'clock, and let's say it's something you've been doing, and that, what happens? Your energy comes up. Sometimes you want to eat, you want to go out. There's this activity level, and that energy should be put into our healing and into our relaxation. So when I talk about healing, I'm not just meaning that the body is ill, and that it is our opportunity to allow a break to the body and to the mind. And this is so important for us to be able to wake up and feel refreshed. And so this is something I think people have forgotten, because pumping stimulants into the body and just thinking that we have to go and go and go. But that's also now why we have disorders like adrenal fatigue and chronic fatigue and things of this nature, because we're driving ourselves too much. And the sleep is meant to be a part of life. We look at it in Ayurveda as one of the 4 pillars of health.
And it's so strange, Myra, that recently there have been so much research and so much writing into the concept of these different sleep chronotypes and people being the night owl. And I've had multiple guests on the show talking about how certain people are wired to be the night owl. And I've had conversations with clients who countered quoting a study or a genetic test or a book recently, and as to why they are wired to be the night owl. And I know I'm always going back to Ayurveda and yoga, and how Ayurveda is the original circadian medicine way before it's come into the forefront today. But what would you like to share to somebody who's torn between the modern science and the concept of Ayurvedic kala and the timing?
Well, there are a couple of things just to consider. In modern medicine, we have been trained to look at the problem and pick it apart, thinking that the tiniest aspect of it is what's going to make a difference. And I think as human beings looking for the answer in the problem, we kept going because we weren't getting the answer. So now everybody's talking about the genetics of it and that kind of thing. And I mean, I was brought up in modern science. My father was a scientist. That was what I thought I would do. But it also comes from a time where we got the idea that we're supposed to conquer nature. And the thing is that in Ayurveda, then what's different is that we recognize that we're made of all the same things that nature is, and that we've been given some higher consciousness, perhaps. But just like in our relating with other human beings, we find that things really work the best when we work in concert with others. And so in our case, that would be working in concert with our own nature, working in concert with nature. So those are some thoughts to just consider with that. And that when we stay focused on the problem, the solution isn't always obvious. But if we shift our attention to how do I find a solution to this, then I need to look at the whole picture. I can't just look at one little piece of it. Right? So, we could relate it. We could relate it to our relating with other human beings. Yeah, we have to really look at the whole picture. I want to be heard and recognized. You want to be heard and recognized, and we need to allow that flow. And it's really the same inside of us, that we recognize that we are part of this nature and the flow of nature.
And we're almost at the end of our episode, Myra. I heard a lot about the importance of dinacharya from you as a foundation for good sleep. Is it necessary that the dinacharya is specific to each individual or constitution?
You can start with something very simple. I mentioned one thing that I do. We do other things. Some people will start with just scraping the tongue. Some people will start with just having a regular bedtime. And this is all part of our, can be part of our dinacharya. And so is it important? Yes, it's important, but it's not absolutely necessary in the sense that we're still all human beings. And if we start with those basic things that we need in order to keep doshas balanced, that's a great place to start. And then from there are going to be specific things that some people will need more than others. Yeah. So some people, it's really important for them to do abhyanga as often as possible. Some other people, and at certain times of year, they may not need to do it as often. Yeah. And so there is some uniqueness to it as well.
Maybe if you could just leave our listeners with your top 3 general guidelines on starting a dinacharya. You mentioned abhyanga. Maybe you could share a little bit about where somebody who doesn't know what is their constitution, where can they begin, what oil. Just 3 general guidelines where it's not going to create any imbalance in somebody, but on the other hand, it might start to help them stabilize their body.
Okay. Yes, I think that, well, I mentioned abhyanga, and unless you're very hot natured, most people can do well with a raw sesame oil. If that feels too warm or you don't like sesame oil for some reason, olive oil will work okay. And if you tend to be really hot natured and you, for example, live in a very hot place, then you might use some coconut oil, maybe some sunflower oil. And again, and sometimes people that are even quite warm natured can do okay with the olive oil, and it's a little bit lighter. And then another thing that really makes a difference, of course, I mentioned, is that it's just to get a regular sleep time before 10. You don't have to know your constitution to get the benefit of that. And the third thing, which might sound funny, but I've had many people tell me, and that is to chew your food thoroughly and don't eat within 3 hours of going to bed. And that will make a big difference in how your sleep goes.
I think that's a great and such an important takeaway, Myra, because constantly people who have sleep issues and then they're talking about needing a pastry, a healthy homemade cake at 11 p.m. and then they're struggling with sleep challenges. I think that was probably, I feel, the most important takeaway of all of it. Where can people find you if they'd like to know about your work or consult with you?
Yes. Well, the name of our company is Hale Pule. It's HalePule.com. And Hale Pule means house of prayer in Hawaiian language, which is where the company was started. And then we're also on Instagram and Facebook. And so yeah, we'd love to have you come and visit us.
Thank you, Myra, for giving us your time and your pearls of wisdom today. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
In this episode, Myra showed us the power of having a dinacharya. I'd really like to end this episode by talking about consistency versus information. All of us fall into an information trap where we focus our energies on reading more, listening to more podcasts, and watching more videos. However, consistency of even one small practice is far more powerful. Choose one practice that resonates with you. Make an intention to do it every single day for the next 30 days and notice how your sleep and your entire life shift for the better. Have a wonderful day. This podcast is intended to provide helpful and informative material on the subject matter covered in the episodes. The podcast is not acting in the capacity of a doctor or a registered dietitian and is not rendering any professional healthcare or medical service. The information in the podcast is not intended as a substitute for medical advice or services or as treatment or cure for any particular health condition. The advice and tools contained herein may not be suitable for your situation. Any medical questions regarding contraindications and cautions or any questions on whether or not to proceed with any practices provided in the show should be referred to qualified health professionals before adopting the same. The podcast specifically disclaims any responsibility for any liability, loss, risk, personal or otherwise, which may be incurred as a direct or indirect consequence of the use of information from this podcast or the application, adoption of any of the information provided.